And hello again, boys and girls. Welcome back to the channel. It's of course your host Miley Startled, and today we are going to be playing or doing an after-action report of the good old-fashioned French, the most overpowered nation right now. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any further because the game was chugging because of how overpowered France was. If I can zoom out, you can see this, the extent of the OP-ness of France, and you can sort of understand why the French are so overpowered now after playing it. They've got an extremely good army of very modern technology early on. The only really people that can contest them is Great Britain with their navy, and even then with the AI, it's very easy to cheese with just naval invasions. The Prussians are still reforming, so it can be very easy clapped into position, and it's got access to some rather developed minor nations that you can forcibly force them into your market. And so it starts off much better than Great Britain because Great Britain has to sort of invest in its colonies to sort of build them up. France simply has to expand their sphere of influence from into Spain and Italy, and they've effectively sort of jumped ahead. Uh, Coupled with their sort of the government system that's extremely well balanced, and a lot of the education and laws are pretty modern and ahead, they can quickly sort of speed ahead in terms of population and in terms of actually education and things to that effect. This means that you can focus more on colonization, and so as you can see, it's very easy to colonize as France. So of course, this game was pretty much spent just blobbing. As soon as I started the game, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to blob. Because I immediately blobbed into Spain, then blobbed into Italy, had a war with Prussia, which broke them apart, and then began blobbing overseas. Of course, I went to my favourite spot, which was, of course, the gold of Brunei and Borneo. And then, of course, once that was done, it was a case of occasionally slapping the English when they tried to do a sort of a cut down to size mission, at which point I would just take all their colonies, which I was able to take in a couple of wars. Unfortunately, I did lose Canada in the end, but that was, of course, as a result of a civil war, which led to the main territory of the side I was protecting being isolated. And because it takes such a long time to fight over the territories to the east and the west, I couldn't get enough war score ticking to make them capitulate before Canada capitulated. In any case, it just took all the world at this stage, and the only reason I've stopped taking the world is because of the lag. Of course, this is for the Anna Builds AI mod, so of course this has been doubly worsened because of how efficient the AI is. And so now I can't even get really anything to play. If you can see here, the game is really chugging, and that becomes a consequence of, if you take a look on the left-hand side, the game is so chugged. It's like I can barely touch the game right now. Um, it's because of this, effectively all the different cultures and the clashes. There's far too many, and the game can no longer handle the amount of cultures in my sort of union. So the quicker I blobbed, the quicker, of course, my nation sort of my game started to chug. So of course, this means as France, you can pretty much do anything you want. If you want to expand early on into Germany, you're free to do so because your army's better. If you want to make a massive customs union by forcing people into a customs union, you can. If you want to annex Great Britain, you really can do anything you want, and the odds are the AI simply cannot stop you because everyone else is too weak in the early game. The only thing you've got to concern yourself is sort of the mid to late game, where of course people's tech starts catching up, and then of course you've got to start to sort of hunker down. Now, of course, by sort of 1885, trench warfare has been invented, and you can sort of go on a defensive. But before that, it really is a blobber's game as France, and as you can probably tell, there's not a lot the other AI can do. The AI can do to stop you because of how overpowered you are at start and how more powerful you are in terms of your military and just the general economy as well. So this means that early on, well, it means you can play France however you want. France is really a beginner nation that only gets which doubles down once you do form more and more customs and you have more and more developed nations. Once you've sort of got Spain and Italy in your colonies, it's very difficult for you to fail because you've got your access to silk, your access to dye, and of course you've got an access to people who will buy your goods. And so really, it's a very interesting game in regards to um, what you can do, if, whether or not you want to take over the world or not, or if you want to just sort of beat Great Britain, and it sort of shows the big failing of the infamy system. The infamy system is, of course, completely broken in regards to the fact I can just ignore it, and the AI is too bad at warfare, and it's too bad at forming a rallying coalition to sort of stop me. And so I've just been able to eat anything I've wanted for the past 50 or 60 years. But without further ado, let's take a look at the in-depth what sort of actions I did. So economy, of course, is always going to go up because I've just got the entire world in my customs union. It's effectively the world market now, and nothing's going to stop me. Equally, education, that's slowly going up because I changed. At first, I changed my bureaucracy manner to colonial affairs, and then, of course, I started to switch back to education. The initial sort of quality of life was pretty bad again for France. I suspect it was a result of seeing how large my markets are, and of course not building all round. Again, I focused very heavily on industry early on, but this is sorting itself out, as you can probably tell. And then, of course, population is the third largest in the world, and it just goes up because of those multicultural laws and that sort of religious liberalization of the country. At this stage, there's nothing that's breaking me, and of course, the income taxes are massive. The minting of the gold mines is about 500k, so most of my revenue. So now every single game is just going to be a case of go for the gold mines if you can, because it's just disgustingly overpowered. And then, of course, bureaucracy and it's pretty high, and most of my states in France are incorporated, but nothing else. So I just started blobbing into Brazil and that for the logs and to get access to gold, but then I got bored of trying to attack Argentina and just started moving in. Same with Mexico and Canada. Canada was just a product of a war of containment waged by the English, so I took England and forced them to become my dominion, but that caused a civil war led by a presidential dictatorship led by a President Valmont Nantel. And of course, Mexico and California all became sort of targets afterwards, just to beat up the United States, just to take more gold. Of course, the United States once again mini collapsing and having its own issues, but nothing I particularly care about. Really, it's just the same old affair because you can do colonialism while aggressive expansion over here. So I focused on colonialism and then, of course, aggressive expansion for that gold in Brunei and Borneo, which eventually led to, I believe, the Dutch East Indies collapsing in itself, probably because of financial woes. Yeah, I thought so. Of course, that then led to the East India Trading Company joining me, and they'll never rebel. The AI, they just don't rebel, so I can just like I don't care how badly they hate me. They can just keep feeding me with their markets of wool, wool of dye, and special sort of luxury goods, and of course silk and all that wonderful stuff. It's not, yeah. Once I have these nations, there's nothing that can really stop me, and it shows the limitations of the game as France being that the AI is not good enough to contain you, and there's not enough penalties from blobbing to stop you really blobbing once you do reach that critical point. The only penalty is, of course, the lack of optimization for the late game. So government-wise, it was mostly focused on the intelligentsia, just to keep them high, to keep more reforms. And then, of course, once these got high enough, the industrialists and intelligentsia actually joined ranks, which is rather useful as France. Very difficult for things to go wrong as France, which is really quite nice to have, especially because once your quality of life improves, no one's really going to kick off. And the laws, you start with multiculturalism. I think you start with multiculturalism anyway. If you don't, it's very easy to get. And you also have total separation. And we also have freedom of conscience. And again, it's very easy to get total separation. Then it's just a case of going colonial resettlement, and then you can really just do nothing if you because you can just wait and maybe occasionally pass the odd law such as healthcare or poor laws. But once you have the money, but it's really a self-running nation in terms of stability. You don't really have to worry too much. And of course, in terms of institutions, we're going up to poor laws to increase the standard of living, to reduce our radicals. And as you can see, our mostly focus was on colonialization for heavy colonial sort of expansion, which again, the AI just does not contest you with. You think there would be like a war goal or a diplomatic play to give up colonies, but it looks like the only time they can intervene is when you're at a war um, with one of the natives, which of course is again a bit tedious because it just means you can blob like I have without. Perhaps there should be costs to colonial expansion. Perhaps colonial expansion should be expensive, but right now there's no real costs apart from bureaucracy, and so you just expand at will and colonize every single point, and of course the game breaks because you've blobbed far too much. And then, of course, the budget, we're on the lowest taxation possible. Consumption taxes, I could probably remove these as well. If I wanted to go max taxation, 698k, probably higher if I wanted. And construction goods on max, government wages on max wages. So if I turn all these to low, there you go, 960k by 1885. I could probably remove some of the customs taxes, but most of it comes from the minting. You can see that again, about half, well, just under half of my budget comes from minting, and then the rest comes from diplomatic packs. So because I have so many puppets and so many dominions, I'm getting paid out the wazoo to keep them, and so it just means that I get more money. So about £1 million is coming from my puppets, so over the majority of my income, which is again something that needs to be limited by independence revolts and things like that. But it is what it is. Yeah, there's nothing really to talk about. France is really a dollar's dishwater nation because of how easy it is. There's nothing stopping you, especially if you do contain Prussia. The industries again, massive clothing industry, pretty large steel industry, some arms and ammunition for more weapons, and then again a lot of it not too excessive, and a lot of tools, but nothing particularly too big because most of my money is actually coming from my puppets. I think most of my investment was actually in rural for food. So initially we had a lot of wheat farms, a lot of rice farms, and a lot of millet farms to meet the food market. And of course, I've got 33 gold mines. I mean, come on now. It's a bit excessive, very, very excessive. Of course, the market is, well, should be more or less fully occupied. A good thing about this massive blobbing is that eventually there's so much food in some of the other nations that you just end up with ridiculously reduced prices for goods such as grain and logs, and so you can pretty much survive. The larger your customs market, the more stable your society because there's simply more and more goods on offer, and of course most of the goods, like again, East India Trading Company is providing the second most food, and then of course you've got Italy is providing the last. So it's excessive. It's like the larger you blob, the easier things get for you, which really it should be harder. If I was doing Napoleon II Electric Boogaloo, then I suspect the rest of Europe would come down and clap me, but they either can't clap me or won't clap me. And you think there'd be more rebellions. I've had the odd rebellion in Spain, but nothing too bad. Of course, the big thing is tools, but once again, it shouldn't be too bad. I can fix that hole. Eventually, because the game is going so slow, I just turned on auto build and left and started watching telly, and came back about 2 hours later to see that it had progressed by about a year or so. So I stopped playing because it was too much. And then of course you got your iron, which is fine, your steel, which I need to fix. Glass I need to fix, but again the custom market's so big I shouldn't have too many issues building that up, and or other nations filling that hole in the customs market. Same with sugar, same with wine. I can easily fix any sort of issues I have because I can simply use my colonies, or I can simply rely on my sort of puppets to sort me out. And of course, I can potentially eat up Egypt if I so choose. But you can see Portugal is a puppet, but unfortunately Portugal didn't turn blue, so I don't know why. But the majority of the world is now disgustingly blue, and the game is now breaking. In terms of what we're exporting, I suspect we won't be exporting a lot because of our massive sort of economy. Let's take a look. And also because of our massive infamy. Oh no, we're exporting tons of food, tons of grain, tons of sugar, basically everything. Because we are the top producer of the world for pretty much all products. Military, nothing really to talk about. Just the most modern tech. So most modern tech, which is trench warfare, so we're going to the defensive phase. I feel like the best thing to do is blob early until you get to trench warfare and go defensive, because then that's when everything becomes a slog. So blob until trench warfare, which is my advice to you. And our technology, we're nowhere near the bottom yet. I think I focus mostly on uh, initially quinine and colonialism, so we pushed down here for the civilizing mission, and then afterwards I think we went down some military techs and until we got to trench warfare, and then of course production is our next on the list. But because we're so educated and because we've got such passive tech spread, it means that also France also gets a lot of passive tech growth regardless of actually having a high literacy rate, which is again pretty amusing. Yeah, that's going up. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. Okay, and let's look at our GDP rank. Yeah, number one, massive prestige because of my level of my puppets. My money is dwarfing. I could keep it game going. If like 2 or 3 billion by the end of the game. And the only thing I'm really low on is standard of living. I would like it to be higher, but that will automatically get higher as things go on. And eventually, I will beat the East India Company and Greater Qing. I've already beaten Russia. It's just a matter of time. Journals, nothing really to look at. I couldn't really get the Suez because no one likes me anymore because of my high pariah status. But it doesn't stop. Really, after a certain pariah status, AI should just be hard coded just to embargo you and just not trade with you full stop and form an actual massive coalition of a bit like Vicky 2 where everyone in the world joins up to kill you. That doesn't really happen in this game. Like you might get one or two majors that join, but then coupled with the lackluster AI and inability to do naval invasions, they can't really stop you blobbing, and you can just do naval invasions behind them to get that ticking war score. So really, it's a bit of a disappointment in terms of that. So we take a look at our nation, take a look at our population. French, Occitan, Spanish, because they were the first one to join the gang, followed by the South Italian, followed by the Breton and the North Italian and the Mexican and the Filipino. So we got a pretty large population of Spanish and a pretty large population of Italian, but everything else is pretty large as well, but it does vary from place to place. And then finally our pops, the thing that is breaking the game right now. So they're meeting most of the demands for grain, clothes, and services, but furniture is pretty expensive right now, and most of their expenditure is still grain, so their standard of living should reduce over time or improve over time. Same with the middle strata, like plus 17%. That's a lot they're spending on. Wine, apparently, we're spending a lot on wine, so I need to build more wineries. And then 14%. Again, don't know why the demands are so high. I think it's the wine. But the services are so cheap, yet the amount of expenditure is so high, which is a pain in the ass. I don't really understand why that's occurring. But anyway, it doesn't matter because 12 million loyalists, nothing's going to really stop me. So our professions, we still got a very large labour pool because of our massive farms, some mechanists, some clerks, some farmers, and then peasants, and then of course engineers and shopkeepers and so on and so forth. In terms of actual population and cultures, this is why it's breaking the game. It's called pop fragmentation, where pop starts spreading across the world, especially because of multiculturalism. And you end up with like 16 different laborers, so Chinese laborers, Mexican laborers, Filipino laborers. And this is what broke my game so early, was the fact that I had multiculturalism early, and then I mass expanded, and it led to so many pops. It's ridiculous. Like I've got a large Dixie community of 1.1 million. Like because everyone is sort of migrating to me because because France is one of the easiest nations to get all the liberal reforms early. And this fragmentation is breaking the game, unfortunately, which is a pity, but hey ho, it is what it is. And then let's take a look at our actual nation itself. So we got a lot of capitalists, clerks, and bureaucrats. It's very middle class in the Ile-de-France or Paris. And of course, we have got a strong Spanish population, which is 2%, and a majority French population. And then if we take a look at our more far-flung colonies, so if we go down to, say, Borneo, we have got a population of French, South Italian, Bornean. Yeah, this is the pop fragmentation. French, Franco-Canadian, Dixie, Royal Amazigh, Yankee, City, North Andean, Portuguese. This is the pop fragmentation that is breaking the game. And most of these guys are farmers, apparently, but I don't think that's the case. I think actually most of them are labourers, so that is a lie. It's just showing me the pops that are the least profitable right now, which of course are the farmers. And anything in Africa we want to look at? Eeny, meeny, let's look at Kenya. Kenya. A couple of African colonies, a population of massive pop fragmentation, which again is just broken the game. It's some multicultural paradise in France, and it's just broken the game. The game can no longer run anymore because of all the sort of migration. Like if we go to our migration market, migration everywhere in France. Migration everywhere in Africa. And some migration elsewhere, but again, we are the migration hub of the world because I think it's the standard of living and I think it's the cultural diversity that's causing that. Although the standard of living is not as high as to be expected. Don't worry about minimum expected, it's simply because I haven't let the game run long enough to fix that. And I'm simply not going to let the game run and break the game any further. Like it's getting to the stage where the game is simply unplayable because of the pops. So we talk about Spain. Spain has got, of course, a monarchy, which we haven't really changed, and its GDP is going up in line with ours. There was a big old war with the English for a while in this period of time, which saw a lot of Spanish territory lost temporarily during the war, but I just bankrolled them, and then I invaded and won, and now since then the economy's booming. Same, Italy's economy system like blobbed and ate them, and since then the economy has boomed because, of course, of our symbiotic markets of my sort of food and industry, iron and coal, and their silk and well, generally the silk for fancy clothing. Of course, Brazil is going to be with us now, so that GDP is hopefully going to pump up. So you can see the war where we annexed them. And then, of course, the East India Trading Company, whose money is going to keep on pumping. I don't know why that dumped early on, but I don't think I did any. There was a war. I don't think I attacked them that early. Nothing really particularly interesting happened this game. It's because I was the interesting thing, and I ate all the maps. What I will say is that now I've found those gold mines in Borneo, I don't really want to. I feel a bit guilty because I just keep blobbing into it because it's the most optimum strategy because nothing is stopping you from blobbing into North Borneo. And I like being able to eat all of that territory and just becoming so rich early on, so I'm able to lower taxes and become more stable. North Borneo has sort of broken me because now I've sort of found a meta strat for at least single player for a lot of the majors, that is eat North Borneo, which I don't really want to do anymore. I feel a bit sad about doing it. Anyway, what to say about France? France is I would say it's the next beginner nation after Great Britain because France, you still have to understand sort of customs unions to an extent, and you will have a bit more of a threat in terms of warfare later on in the game. But in terms of its ability to blow up so early, is just nothing can beat it. Great Britain has to invest in its colonies. France can just force customs unions or force puppets or just peacefully form customs unions, and it will simply just bully the other nations into submission and eat their developed markets because these nations have much more developed markets than, say, Canada or the Cape Colony. And so all I have to do is eat those, and I'm really immediately I'm on the gravy train to success. And because the infamy system is so weak at the moment and doesn't have that much damage, I think the only thing it does is increase radicals by conquest. But bear in mind, I'm not conquering, I'm making dominions and puppets, and the puppets and dominions aren't kicking off, they're not revolting, they're not trying to leave when my infamy is so high. I mean, my infamy, how high is it? My infamy is at 730 for Pete's sake. It used to be at like 1,700 for like a period of time, and it's just a bit broken. Like France shows the broken aspects of the game. It shows the broken pop system, the broken migration system. It shows the broken infamy system. Like France, you can do whatever you like. Of course, in multiplayer games, that's not going to be the case because you are going to be sort of contained by Great Britain, Austria, and Prussia, and Italy is of course not going to let you sort of eat them. But it's still a bit. France is a disappointing nation because it's just too easy. There's no real challenges as France. Everything is to be played for as France. You can do anything you want, and nothing's really going to stop you, apart from potentially the British Navy, and even then it can't be everywhere at once. And so it's just an easy game, as France. So overall, we have an empire spanning most of Britain's known empire, nearly all of Africa, almost all of South America. The only reason I didn't blob these is because I couldn't be bothered. It was a lazy expansion towards the end. And we have more or less dominated the map. I suppose I could go for New South Wales next, and eventually, of course, the Japanese shogunate. But for now, it's just a case of I don't want to keep playing this nation because the game is broken and I can no longer advance. I think I'm going to turn off the AI mod because I think it's too efficient and it's perhaps breaking the game quicker than if I had it on, and so I'm gonna have to turn off the AI mod. It's still a good mod if you want more greater competition economically, but it's still it's because it just means regardless mod or not, you will get to the end game where the game slows down to a crawl because of the pop fragmentation. But of course, with the AI enhanced, they will of course be able to get that end game quicker than if they weren't advanced. And as soon as I started blobbing, my end game was achieved in 1870, and then ever since then has been pain. So, great things about France. It's good at everything at the start. It is really supreme. It's got access to easy partners for customs unions. It can colonize at will because it doesn't have a lot of threats early on, apart from Prussia, which you can limit. And it is pretty much unbeatable in the early game, meaning that you can blob at will, especially against the AI. The bad things about France is that's too easy. It shows the issues with the game, being that it the buggy AI, the inability politically to contain you, and of course the bad naval invasion mechanics. And of course the other bad thing is that it's just not a fun nation to play because there's no real challenge to it. You can of course limit yourself and just play as a self-contained France with basic African colonies and try soft diplomacy, but why when you can just beat everyone and everything and nothing is going to stop you? At least with Prussia, you've got the issue of a three-way war. At least with Austria, you've got the issue of Russia and the Ottoman Empire, and France potentially weighing in. At least it's Great Britain, you've got a small army to start and you've got to invest in your colonies before you really pop off. Whereas as France, it's just like decrease relations, puppet, dominion, advance. Decrease relations, puppet, dominion, advance, and you just do that everywhere, and nothing stops you until really trench warfare, and that's what stops you, trench warfare. But that's it. I don't recommend playing France, simply because France is too easy, and it shows the bugs in the game that need to be fixed. There are some interesting multiplayer mods I've seen right now. I have been looking for multiplayer games. Just to do a brief run-throughs of them, but of course the new sort of server system that shows a lot of one-player, two-player games, and it isn't showing actually committed Discord groups yet. But there's a few mods. I've been watching a couple of streamers online, and they've got some really good mods that have fixed pop fragmentation and are beginning to improve efficiency. So I recommend once that becomes sort of fixed, we'll hopefully see more multiplayer, large-scale Discord games coming out. There's still some little bugs, but it seems like they've got the game mostly stable now. And fingers crossed, with more patches and updates, Paradox will be able to make it much more efficient and stop the easier bugs from occurring. That's it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later. Adieu.